Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. As you all are joining, if you could please choose your preferred interpretation channel using the interpretation mode at the bottom. And we will be getting started shortly. Hello, everyone. While we wait for people to get joined this evening, if you would love to put your district, your electoral school district in the chat, we would love to know where people are checking in from this evening. We have District 1. Thank you, Amari. I see District 5 and District 9. Awesome. Hello from District 3. Thank you, Clint. I see District 5 Little Village too. Welcome, you all. Again, please make sure you choose your preferred interpretation channel down at the bottom using the interpretation icon. Hi from District 10 and District 7. Hey, everyone. Good evening. Good to see you all. All right. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Turn up the music. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our elected school board town hall. My name is Imani Johnson. I am the manager of community engagement here at Kids First. I'm also a former Chicagoan, shout out to the West Side, and I'm also a mother. I'm very excited to be here with you all this evening to discuss this monumental change that is taking place in Chicago. For the first time ever, Chicago will have an elected school board, and November 5th marked the beginning of this transition. So that's super exciting. As we move closer to a seat in this fully elected board, it's really important that Chicago residents are aware of the changes that are taking place. So for that reason, I am here to give you all the information you need to know about Chicago's transition to an elected school board. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to check in with our watch parties that are across the city this evening. A special thanks to our partners for so graciously hosting in-person watch parties to view this town hall. So let's welcome our in-person attendees at Star Community Services in Auburn Gresham. We also have Build in Austin. We also have the Education Community Committee in Belmont Cragen, as well as Project Vision and a coalition for a better Chinese American community in Chinatown. And finally, we have Instituto del Progreso Latino in Little Village. Hi from everyone, to all of the watch parties. Welcome you all. Thank you for joining. All right. Again, thank you all so much. And with that being said, let's get into our agenda for the evening. So I'll begin our evening by just going over what we can expect for our time together. We just went through our welcome. We'll then move into an analysis of the election results. We'll have a quick poll. Then we'll go into our community leader panel. We'll go over some poll results. We'll talk about our parent priorities. And then we'll go into a parent and student panel. We'll close with a call to action. And so, yeah, let's get into it. So, as I mentioned, this year marks a monumental change in Chicago's school board governance. The Chicago Board of Education will be transitioning from a 7-member appointed by the mayor board to a 21-member elected board, meaning that Chicago residents will now have the opportunity to elect board members to represent their children. So let's discuss a little bit about where we are in this transition. As you all know, elections were just held, and you probably noticed on your ballot a section on the school board. So for the next 2 years, 2025 through 2026, Chicago will have a hybrid board. So what do I mean when I say hybrid? That means that for now, 10 members will be elected by the people, and 10 members, along with the citywide president, will be appointed by the mayor. And that will bring us to a total of a 21-member hybrid board. So how will we get to that fully elected board that we're talking about? In 2026, elections will be held again, where now voters will elect 10 members to 4-year terms. They will also elect 10 members to 2-year terms, along with the president, which will now bring us to that 21-member fully elected board. Elections for school board will always be held in November of even numbered years, and the terms will begin in January of that following year. So that pretty much sums up what this transition will look like over the next couple of years. So now let's get into some election results. With Chicago being one of the largest and the last district in Illinois to transition to an elected board, this has been one of the most anticipated school board races in the country. So let's review the outcomes of this election. So before getting into the results of this election, let's take a look at some background context on what typical voter turnout looks like for different types of elections across the country. So typically, presidential elections yield a voter turnout of around 67%. Gubernatorial elections yield around 50% voter turnout. Municipal elections, so voting for mayors and city representatives, normally yield around 15%. And finally, we see that school board elections typically yield the lowest voter turnout, bringing out between 5 and 10% of voters. Chalkbeat released an article today stating that 53% of Chicago's registered voters casted a ballot for school board members. This is much higher than the norm that we see, the 5 to 10%. And that pretty much shows that there is an advantage in holding school board elections during presidential elections because they will yield a higher voter turnout. So nationally, school board races have become quite expensive. For example, when LA school district transitioned to an elected school board, it became a multi-million-dollar race. So going into this election cycle, it was expected that the Chicago school board race would mirror those of the larger districts across the country. So let's take a look at the campaign spending and some of the biggest financial contributors in these school board elections. So Chicago's first school board elections became pretty pricey, with nearly $5.7 million going directly to candidates' campaigns and $3.17 million spent separately by pro-school choice super PACs as of November 7th. The Chicago Teachers Union and several allied groups funded by the union spent at least $1.7 million directly on CTU endorsed candidates. In fact, one individual candidate loaned his own campaign $550,000. Super PACs, which face no contribution limits and were not allowed to coordinate with candidates, sent direct mail, text, and ran political ads supporting 7 school board candidates. The largest reported contribution to a super PAC was nearly $1 million. In 9 of the 10 districts, the contributions and funding were so large that they busted the caps on how much individual contributors can give to a campaign. Contribution caps were lifted in 9 of the 10 of the districts due to a quirk in Illinois' campaign finance law. If a candidate or their family gives $100,000 to their campaign, or if an independent expenditure spends $100,000 for or against a candidate, the legal contribution limits are removed for all candidates in the race. That means that any candidate in 9 of the districts was legally allowed to raise unlimited amounts of money from anyone who wanted to contribute. The only district that this didn't apply to was the one district with only one candidate on the ballot. So now let's look at who had the most influence in these elections. Support from special interest groups can go a really long way in increasing candidates' chances of winning. In this case, there were several organizations endorsing and financially supporting candidates. Let's take a look at how those panned out. So 3 candidates backed by school choice groups won, 3 unaffiliated candidates won, and 4 candidates backed by pro-labor or union organizations won. On the right, you can see some of the main groups that supported candidates in this election. So now let's take a look at the winners in each district. So in District 1, we have the winner, Jennifer Custer. Jennifer Custer won with 51% of the vote. She is a CPS parent at Locke Elementary, a former teacher, union leader, and a former school administrator in the Chicago suburbs and Wisconsin. Next, we have in District 2, Ebony L. DeBerry winning with 43.4% of the vote. She was a former CPS teacher, a former CPS parent at Gale Elementary, Disney Magnet, and Northside College Prep. She's also a former Gale Elementary LSC member, and she's a CPS graduate from Gale Elementary, Decatur Classical, and Sullivan High School. Central office staffer, a CPS parent at Whitney Young Magnet, and former parent at Bell Elementary. She's also a former Bell LSC chair and member. She served on Citywide LSC advisory board. She's a former CPS teacher at Doulas and Hardigan Elementary School, and later a substitute teacher. In District 5, we have Aaron G2 Brown winning with 100% of the vote. He was uncontested on the ballot. He is a CPS parent at Kenwood Academy, a former LSC member at Robinson Elementary and Dyett High School. He's a CPS graduate of Bennett and Wendell Smith Elementary Schools in Kenwood. And he also participated in the 2015 hunger strike to save Dyett. In District 6, we have the winner, Jessica Biggs, winning with 44.7% of the vote. She's a former CPS principal at Burke Elementary, which grew its student population and came off of academic probation during her tenure. She's a former Burke LSC member, also a former resident principal at Cantor Middle School, and she's a CPS parent at Galileo Scholastic Academy. In District 7, we have Yesenia Lopez as the winner, winning with 56.8% of the vote. She's a graduate of Picker Elementary and Juarez Community Academy High School. She's also a volunteer at Tepachali, Saucedo, Juarez, and Spry schools. In District 8, we have Angel Gutierrez winning with 62.8% of the vote. He is a parent of students at Catholic schools. He's also the Chief Advancement Officer at Chicago Hope Academy. And he's a former leader at Catholic Charities of Archdiocese of Chicago. In District 9, we have Therese Boyle winning with 36.3% of the vote. She's a former CPS teacher at McKay, Barden, and Stevenson Elementary Schools, and she's also a school psychologist at other Southside schools. And finally, in District 10, we have the winner, Shay Rhymefest Smith, winning with 32.2% of the vote. He's a former CPS parent at Shoesmith and McCorkle Elementary Schools. He attended CPS schools himself, Boucher Elementary, formerly known as Bryn Mawr, and South Shore High School. And so that wraps up the winners of the 10 districts, the elected winners of the districts. So we just went through the 10 elected winners in each district. You can see those districts here in bright orange and polka dot. So that leaves 10 districts to be appointed by the mayor by December 16th, which you can see here in the black stripes. So now let's pause, and I want to take a pause here to gather some thoughts from you all, the residents of Chicago. We would like to know how you feel the board should improve its practices surrounding authentic community and family engagement. So if you could please use this QR code or the link that we will drop in the chat to take a quick poll on effective school board practices. And I'll pause here for about another minute so to give you all time to take the poll. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move forward, but please feel free to continue taking that poll. So now I would like to introduce our community leader panel. As we transition from a 7-member board to a 21-member board, it's going to be extremely important for there to be avenues for the board members to engage with the broader community. So this panel will include community leaders from across the city to speak to their hopes of the new board. So now I will hand it over to Rima Amin from Chalk Beach, Chicago.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm super excited and honored that Kids First thought of Chalkbeat to help moderate this panel. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first round of panelists who are, as Imani said, community partners and leaders. On this panel tonight, we have Grace Chan McKibben. She is the Executive Director of Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. Next, we have Dr. Byron Brazier. He is the pastor of Apostolo, Apostolic Church of God. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Chairman of the board of the network of Woodlawn, and he is a CPS graduate. And finally, we have Juan Soto. He is the executive director of Pilsen Neighbors Community Council. So I'm just going to jump right in, if that sounds okay to our panelists. Great. Okay. So just, before we get started, just wanted to highlight what Imani said about voter turnout. It was really high voter turnout, and I think that's exciting for the city, and, really says a lot about the fact that the community is engaged in this. And so I think that's a good segue into our first question, which is, what should the elected school board do to have authentic community engagement with CPS as students and families? And how would that be different from how the current board and past appointed boards have engaged with families? I want to start with you, Grace.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rima. I want to highlight that statistic one more time. 53.5% of total registered voters voted in the Chicago school board race, and that's actually 78.74% of people who voted for a school board race. So that's a large number. I think for a long time, because the mayor appoints the CEO of the Chicago Public School Board, and then I'm sorry, the mayor appoints the CEO of CPS and also the school board. So there had not been a lot of engagement other than very formal meetings where people are just invited to give short public comments, and then you go into a long board meeting. So I think that what we would like to see, since we have elected members of the school board that the electorate actually elected, that they would go around to all the neighborhoods, to all the resident, to talk to residents and to schools and to parents. What I worry about is because both the entities that represent the charter school pack and also the CTU had put in so much resources to invest in these candidates that we end up having people that represent the CTU and represent the charter school pack as opposed to the people.
Dr. Brazier, if you'd like to weigh in.
Sure, thank you very much. And his last name is Brazier, like Frazier.
Brazier, excuse me. Thank you for correcting me.
And then the church's name is the Apostolic Church of God.
Apostolic. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Your question was really about the elected school board and authentic community engagement. Is that correct?
Yes.
The whole idea of an elected school board is to have representation. And so it is important then that every community know the two representatives that that represent them, and get to know the others, and that is from the community moving into the board, and then it's up to those board members to actually engage in the communities as well. That then makes it authentic. If we're only chasing board members and they're never coming out on their own volition, then the whole process really has failed. So as we take a look at how what we do to actually contribute to this process is really how we engage and how we systematically understand what our communities are doing what the data is, and that the school system then provides the community organizations with what is necessary in order to actually look positively at this. So it's not just the school board members who are coming out just having listening sessions. It really is about the data that we have by community. That's the whole reason for the elected school board, is to really understand and to get to the background of what our communities look like.
Thank you. And Juan,
Yeah.
and just to repeat the question for everyone who's watching, what should the elected school board do to have actual authentic community engagement with CPS's students and families? And as has kind of been mentioned already, this is, as a reporter, I hear about this all the time, and I hear critiques about it all the time, that the board, there's really no real avenue to take the temperature of how the public is feeling. So yeah, please, Juan, go ahead.
No, thank you very much. First of all, I think what is implied, but let me say more specifically that I'm cautiously hopeful in a new elected school board, but there is much work to be done by the board and the new elected board to build trust. And that's something that I think has caused a lot of issues in not only communication, but in efforts to listen. And I'm saying this to listen both from a community perspective, but also to listen and make adjustments to what are the needs in the community. So this comes out, at least from my experience in the education community world, has been one, you have to be trustworthy, which the board and the new elected school board needs to address in an authentic way. And how do you do that? You do that not only by listening, but by taking actions based on what the community has provided their interest to be. Because every community is different. The circumstance in one part of the city is very different than in another part of the city. So it needs different approaches, but it's the listening and addressing that by actions and not by, well, we have this blanket statement that this is how we're going to do things to address the needs. But the second part of that is, I hope, and again, I'm cautiously optimistic or hopeful here that that this elected school board will be more bold because it's an independent voice, more bold to try new things, to be willing to try new things and not be beholden to a political position just because they're elected position, but be able to listen and engage with the community.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do something different for the rest of the questions going forward. I'm going to direct them to specific people. If any of you feel like super strongly about it and want to add on, just speak up and you can have the floor. But going to try to focus on one person for each question. And again, don't be shy to jump in. Okay, so actually Juan's comments are a bit of a nice segue because they're about individual communities. So Grace, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, what specific policies or programs do you hope that the new school board will prioritize to better serve students in your communities, and if you could touch on what you think they can do to better serve the needs of all different kinds of communities.
I'll speak first about Chinatown. So even as we were advocating for drawing of the maps for the elected school board, we were advocating for all of the Asian American community to be grouped together. So meaning Chinatown to be grouped together in one district, and West Ridge and so on and so forth. We knew that, you know, it wouldn't be possible to have a majority Asian American district as we were able to get in the city ward, just because of the geographies. As it turned out, Chinatown, which has the largest concentration of Asian Americans, is divided into 3 different districts. Most of it is in 7, and some of it is in 6, and some of it is in 8. And I think that that does mean that, you know, we'll have to mobilize parents and students and teachers to advocate in multiple places. For the Asian American community, bilingual education for the students, whether it is Chinese or Hindi or Tagalog and so on, is important. I know that the school, there are very few bilingual Chinese English education programs, and also for the parents, because there are some, even if the students themselves are fluent in English, there are so many parents who need help in different languages. That is a big advocacy point that we've been trying to talk to CPS about for a really long time. Some of you may know that the Chinatown community, Chinatown and Bridgeport communities have been advocating for a high school for the past 30 years. I know that there are multiple obstacles, and both policy as well as program obstacles, and now resource obstacles as well. But I think that that's one of the things that we'll continue to talk to all the school board members about. But I think that overall for the Asian American community is really how to take care of the families as a whole, the students as well as the needs of the parents. That is the most important, and we'd like the new school board members to help with that.
Thank you. And yeah, language access is so important, especially right now as we're seeing more English language learners enroll in CPS. And for those who don't know, the district, you know, enrolled more than 12% greater, like the share of L's is that much greater this year. So yeah, that's a really important point. Juan, Dr. Brazier, anyone want to step in really quickly, or should I move on?
Well, I certainly would like to
Sure. Yes, please.
I think first and foremost, we have to have a functioning school board. And right now, even the old one or the previous one did not function as well in order to actually create the outcomes that all of our students need and require. And right now we have 20 board members that don't know one another and have no norms or protocols to actually make a decision. And so I think our first choice really is, if there's a community engagement, is to ensure that the board members at least know one another and have protocols and their norms. Here's how a decision is made. And they actually create a functioning school system that addresses the majority of the needs of our students, whether it be in the budget, whether it be in the number of hours, or what the teachers are doing. I think the second element really does come down to how you look, or how you modernize our system. The gentleman once told me, he said, we in the human services business, we manage people in their condition. And when you manage someone in poverty, that's where they stay. And so when you begin to take a look at, are we just managing and tweaking and just developing certain things, or are we actually being creative? Are we actually saying, here's what the problem, here's how we're going to solve the problem? And it requires then that the board actually help organize what the school, what CPS actually looks like from an operational standpoint. Then you can get down to the community level to be able to say, what then do individual communities need? So we're looking at in Woodlawn, we're looking at the community of schools. We have 10 community of schools and a high school, and how do they all function? So, you know, one of the issues that we're going to present is, you know, to our 2 representatives, is we believe that a community of school function is an organizational process that could make a difference. So you're not depending on one individual school, or a community organization is not looking at 10 schools, but all the principals, the district people, and everybody else are looking at the community and the community of schools that support that. And when you look at it that way, it'll make it a lot easier than trying to look at individual schools and individual programs.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, I think, and it sounds like you're saying the the new board needs to figure out first how to function with each other in in this totally new world, at
There's
least
no
for
doubt.
Chicago.
There's no doubt. I mean, as soon as they walk in, they're going to have to deal with the union. They have to deal with the budgets, and they don't know how to they don't know how to make a decision yet.
Right.
This is really going to be an issue of leadership, and many of the board members do not have board level credentials. We're going to have some difficult times in school in 2025.
Yeah, well, there's the dose of reality that we all need. Um, so,
If I
how
could,
about oh yeah, go ahead, Juan. Sure.
I can't agree anymore with Dr. Brazier. Um, but like again, I want to say and reiterate that, I'm cautiously, hopeful, but this new school board, given what Dr. Frazier just raised, also again in my experience, there has been the lack of voices from the stakeholders in any given community, which not only includes, the electeds, because I know previous boards have been swayed by local aldermen on certain decisions and become political and politicized. The mayor's office. So having stakeholders like student voice committees, LSCs, engage teachers, principals, and other CBOs to create that dialogue. My concern is that one district gets pitted against another district, and I think we all lose when that happens. And like Dr. Brazier has said, some of these members don't have any governing experience or those credentials. So we need to, lift up that reality moving forward, so they pay attention to what the community, is in need of.
Okay. Juan, I'm going to go to you for to start us off for the next question, and then if folks want to jump in, they can. What role do you think, as someone who is part of a community-based organization, what role do you think that community-based organizations and other partners should play in helping to inform and guide the decisions of the new elected board?
Sure. Thanks for that question. So there are, like I had mentioned in my previous response, stakeholders. I think that there are many organizations with a very good track record about engagement and wanting to work with public schools. But the systems that are in some places that the board has placed in terms of, engagement for who gets access to the schools, how they get access to the schools, and what resources local CBOs can provide to schools sometimes creates a lot of red tape. So I would think that one of the big picture item here that we're exploring ourselves is the creation of schools as community center models, meaning that pre and post engagements with parents and students, before school starts, after school starts, and really support from the philanthropic side of any community, how they also are seeing public schools, especially with this loss of enrollment district-wide. And at the same time, we're seeing, as you mentioned earlier, Rima, an increase of enrollment by a smaller segment, but the newcomers. And how do we address that population as well? So CBOs can play a major role in that, but I think need to come prepared to engage with any school or school community with a level of understanding. We're on the same page. We want success for the schools and we want them to grow because we want children to have the accessibility and equity that any school can provide.
And Dr. Brazier, Grace, would either of you like to add anything to that?
Sure. I think Juan's approach is we've spoken about this before, where you have a community of schools. But one of the things that I've come to understand is that institutions talk to institutions, and so you can have it's imbalance when you have a parents trying to talk into the institution because there isn't enough voice. But when the community and the community-based organization becomes the institution that is the voice of that community, so you don't have a whole lot of voices, but that community organization actually creates and defines the voices of the community. Then that organization can then be that institution to talk to the institution because it must be represented in a manner that is consistent with our norms. So the teachers have a union, right? The custodial, they have a union. They become their own institution dealing with the institution. Communities tend to be fractured because their residents and their stakeholders are not in conversation. But if there was an organization that brought those elements together and created the educational institution along with the principals and the LSCs, and everybody is now working and they're working through this. It just can't be a CBO that gets dollars from the state to do safety programs. You know, that model is insufficient. If you're going to have a comprehensive outcomes, you must have a comprehensive organization in order to get it done. And I believe that's what Juan was referring to.
Okay. And Grace, you know, I know I said one person at a time, but you all have interesting takeaways. So Grace, I'd love to hear from you too.
Okay, that's good. I just want to say that I agree with both, Juan and Dr. Brazier, and that organizations are important, but organizations also sometimes represent one point of view or one opinion, even if they gather their own stakeholders. So I think that multiple voices are always important. In the community, there might be different organizations that represent different voices. It's important to make sure that we hear from everyone. I think community-based organizations plays a big role, as both Dr. Brazier and Juan mentioned, because sometimes we are able to galvanize or focus the community voices. But I think that, the caution is also that, of course, I would like everybody to only listen to CBCAC and nobody else, but but I also respect my colleagues here. And one sometimes thinks that I'm very bossy, but I think that
I appreciate you for it.
The different voices, yes.
So incredibly, that is all the time we have for this first panel. Thank you so much to all of you for your really, for giving your time today and your very thoughtful takeaways. Certainly as a reporter, it's making me think too about how to view this upcoming change in governance and everything that we'll see going forward. So thank you so much to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Rima.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. That was amazing. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our moderator, Rima, for your valuable insights that you've offered everyone this evening. So we can go ahead and move forward. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna have to refresh. There we go. Sorry. Okay. So our poll results are in, everyone. So results are based on average rankings for each potential board improvement. Structures for parent advisory councils, blue on the figure, tended to rank rather highly. They had the most top ranked responses. Similarly, adding parents to board subcommittees as non-voting members, the green also ranked fairly highly in general. Conversely, continuation of office hours ranked the lowest. So thank you all so much for adding your insights and participating in this poll. We really appreciate what you all have added this evening. Thank you. So now let's talk a little bit about parent priorities and what is important to parents as we transition to this newly elected school board. So all the way back in 2021, Kids First Chicago hosted a series of workshops where we pretty much asked parents what was the most important to them in this transition to an elected school board. And so here are some of those priorities that we heard directly from parents. I think it was over 300 parents who we actually had in these workshops. So the first priority focuses on campaign spending limits. Parents really don't want money to determine who wins this election. Second was parent seats on the board. We want to make sure that some board seats should be reserved for CPS parents. Third was non-citizen participation. Wanted to ensure that parents who aren't able to vote are still able to have a voice and a say in this. And so we're hoping that parents who aren't citizens are allowed to vote, regardless of immigration status. And finally, it was fair racial representation. So the school board should reflect the student body it serves, because we know that the census demographics are much different than CPS demographics, and we want to make sure that the board is reflecting the demographics of CPS students. So now let's compare these priorities to the actual election results. First, looking at CPS parent representation. So there are only 4 current CPS parents that will serve on the school board. There's 2 former CPS parents who are represented. And why does this matter? Because CPS parents bring firsthand knowledge of the challenges and opportunities within our schools. And so their voices are going to be essential in shaping policies that meet the needs of students and families. Now let's look at racial and ethnic representation. So right now there are 4 white elected board members, 3 Black elected board members, and 3 Latina. Based on the elected board members, this does not reflect the 89% of CPS students who are students of color. And this is important because representation matters. Leaders who share the racial and cultural experiences of communities they serve are more likely to champion equitable policies and understand diverse perspectives. So we're going to take a look at campaign spending. But before we do that, I want to establish some key terms with you all. So first, let's talk about the different types of funding streams. First, we have individual fundraising. So that includes candidate fundraisers, individual contributions, and self-donations. So for an example, we talked about one of the candidates giving themselves $550,000 to their campaign. Also, Shane Rhymefest, he funded his entire campaign out of his own money. Second, we're talking about endorsements. So those are funding streams that funds from supportive organizations. The funds are directly funneled into the campaign. So example, you see endorsers like CTU and Inks. And then finally, we have independent expenditures. So those are independent of the campaign, meaning that candidates do not receive these funds directly into their campaigns. So examples of this, we've mentioned super PACs, political action committees, which can raise unlimited amounts of money from corporations, individuals, and unions for independent expenditures like commercials or mailings. So let's take a look at the money that went into these elections. This chart shows the money raised along with the independent expenditures for each candidate in each district. The lime green in each bar represents the money raised by winning candidates. The darker green bars represent the money raised by the losing candidates in each district. And the red in each bar represents the money spent on each candidate from independent expenditures. It's important to note that the money spent represented by the red bar is from outside groups, like I mentioned, like who potentially sent mailers, text messages, commercials in support of the candidate. So let's look at District 3 and District 8 as an example. In both of these districts, the winning candidates were badly outraised if you look at the lime green versus the darker green bars. But then when you add in the red, you can see there was more total money spent on the winning candidate in both of these districts. So that could have potentially helped those candidates win in those districts. You can also see the opposite effect in other districts, for example, districts 1, 9, and 10. A lot of outside money was spent on behalf of losing candidates, showing that money won't always push a candidate over the top. And also, where the money came from did not indicate success either. I think it's important to recognize how active super PACs were in these elections. As we can see, in all of the districts except District 5, super PACs spent a lot of money on campaigns. Now let's take a look at the money raised through individual fundraising and endorsements in each district. So how did money matter? As you can see, of the 9 candidates who raised less than $50,000, all of them lost. 6 of the 7 candidates who raised over $250,000 also lost. Out of the 10 candidates who raised the most money in their district, only 3 of them won. So money did not guarantee success, but a lack of it did correlate with loss. So now we are going to turn it back over to Rima for our parent and student panel. I'll thank you again to Rima from Chalk Beach, Chicago for moderating this panel. I'll turn it over to her.
Great, thank you. And I think someone on that end has to restart my video, but I can get going. Okay, thank you to our parent and student panelists. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and please, just please help me correct the pronunciation of your name. I haven't been able to meet all of you in advance yet. So first we have Camila Ortiz. She is a student at Hubbard High School, is part of the MICVA Challenge, and is on the CPS Student Advisory Council. Next, we have Sarah O'Malley. Sarah is a student at Sen High School and is also part of MICVA Student Advisory Council. Next, we have Abigail Vences, who is part of the CPS parent, who is a CPS parent and alumni, and is part of Kids First's elected school board task force. And then finally, we have Carrie Glaspie, who is at the local school council at John Hay Academy and is also part of Kids First's Parent Advisory Board and the elected school board task force. So very stacked panel we have here today. Welcome, everybody. I am going to get right into it here. And would love to start with our students. So I will start with Sarah, and I'll remind everyone if you could, keep your answers to under 2 minutes. We want to cover a lot of ground here, and we have lots of you, thankfully, on the panel today. So starting with Sarah, as a parent, or as a student, and then for the parents, through your parent lens, what are your top priorities or concerns for the new elected school board? And, what do you want them to address once they are sworn into office in January? Sarah, are you with us? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to someone else.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
that's
I
cool.
was giving camera permission and then it just like locked me out of the thing.
No, no worries at all. Go ahead.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. As a student, what are your top priorities or concerns for the new elected school board? What would you like them to address? Are there changes that you would like them to address in how schools are managed?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a big disparity like between LSCs, especially. I'm on my school's LSC. I know last year, or even this year as well, as my second term, LSC students are not representative of the student population. I mean, I'm a quarter Black, but I'm 75% white. The other two members last year were white. In reference, our school is majority Black and Latino. And then this year, one of our student reps are white, and then me and another student are a quarter Black. And as well, I think there's a big problem with the enforcement of LSC. I would say in reference to like advertising, where I think that it's oftentimes not advertised to students. And I think that's why we oftentimes see a disparity in who is able to run for LSC as students. I'd like to see more like action on that on the part of the elected school board. As well, I think that I would hope to see more power go to students in the elected school board. I know that we have the student representative, but it is honorary. They don't have any voting power. And I know the student on there, I think Carolina, she's like an amazing speaker and she has so many great ideas. And I feel like she'd be way better able to effectively make change in Chicago if she had a vote.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna jump over to one of our parent panelists, Carrie. If you could, talk about as a parent, what are your top priorities and things that you'd like the board to address? And I want to make sure we have Carrie with us. Not sure we do. Okay, I'll move on to, we'll come back. Abigail, would you like to talk about, through a parent lens, what you'd like to see?
Hi. Yeah, I like to see the board members more involved in the community now that there's so many. Hopefully they could get to their schools in their district and see what are the needs versus before there was only a few people. And so obviously they can't go visit every school and see what's needed. And so hopefully we have more of a voice as parents and students, and they could bring that to the table.
Okay, thank you. And just because I'm not able to see the other panelists, I just want to open the floor up to our other panelists if you'd like to answer this. We have another student I know who would love to hear from you. Okay. I will go on and I'll go ahead and move on to the next question then so we can keep this going. What steps can the new school board take to ensure that voices of parents and students, particularly those from underserved communities, are heard and acted upon? And Abigail, why don't we start with you on this one?
No, I think like I mentioned a bit earlier, like I would like to see the school board members more active in the community, ask what is needed, or they could actually see what is needed, maybe join the LSC meetings, see what's going on, and then bring that back so they could find a fix for it.
Okay. Sarah, why don't we go to you next?
Okay, could you clarify the question, please?
Yeah, as what steps can the new school board take to make sure that your voices as students and the voices of parents and families are being heard and acted upon? And this is kind of goes back to the question during the first panel. You often hear that there's no real, authentic place to air concerns, and you can go to a board meeting and you get your 2 minutes and you got to sign up and get a spot, and it's really hard to we hear to get your voice heard by the people in power. So what steps do you think that this new elected school board can take to make sure that they are listening to people, not necessarily people who have the time to show up to a school board meeting?
I would definitely say more open communication. I think that it's hard, especially as if like you don't know what's going on with the elected school board. I think it is hard to get into the know, especially considering that I think this year's election was kind of overshadowed by the presidential election. Um, and I think moving forward, hopefully there could be more media campaigning, like just simply like commercials or like advertisements, as well as like potentially like emails to potential not candidates, sorry, voters.
And you all will have to forgive me. I'm already, we have so many panelists that I am forgetting some of the names. And so there's another student panelist I know. Could we ask you to weigh in on this? And again, I'm sorry that your name is escaping me. Okay, I'm not sure if Camilla, are you there? All right. I see Carrie. So Carrie, why don't we jump to you?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What steps do you think that the new school board can take to really, authentically engage with parents and students, and really hear from parents and students from lots of different communities?
Well, I think for one, that how they should engage, they should attend some of the schools so they can be able to engage and know what's going on with the schools. They need to get feedbacks from the students because they are the ones inside of the schools, and they definitely need to get the feedbacks from the parents as well. Hold on.
Carrie, can I ask you, when you say they need to get feedback, what do you think is a good way to get that feedback? Like, do you think that they should be attending LSC meetings, as an example, or like, how do you think they can work to really extract that feedback in a way that feels genuine?
They can like even they can have meetings like when the kid's not at school, so their voice can be heard, because a lot of meetings be when the children are in school, or if they have like a game or something. So it's like in between, like, do I go speak about what's going on with me, or do I go play my football game or my volleyball game? So now they stuck in the middle. But if they can have meetings just to hear the kids' voice, because once again, the kids are the ones that's in the schools. The parents, we not in the school. Our kids are in there. So I really do
通
think the
过会
kids'
议
voice.
这个会议来发表，而不是要他在运动的时候或者玩游戏的时候去
Oh, sorry, I think
问。
we have an interpreter who we can hear, everyone can hear.
Yeah.
I don't know if Okay, good. Sorry, go ahead, Carrie, finish your thought
But
there.
that's my biggest concern right there. Like I said, it's the kids, the children's. They are the ones, once again, have to sit inside of a school. It's their life. So with their voice being heard of how they think what's going on with them, I think that's a big issue with the kids' voices are not being heard, and it's not enough of the districts. It's not enough of them coming out to the school to engage with the parents nor the children. They just going off of something that they heard, instead of just coming out and engaging themselves. Come out to the community.
Okay. I think we may have lost Camilla. Camilla, if you are here, just let me know, or if someone can give me a heads up if we get her back. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. What role, there's a lot of things that the school board has power over. And funding has been a big thing that the district has been talking about recently, projecting deficits going forward. And there's so many more issues though, beyond funding and budget. So I want to hear from all of you, and maybe we can start with Abigail. What role do you think that this elected school board should play in addressing different inequities? And what I mean by that is inequities in funding, in resources, and opportunities that are available to students across different CPS schools. What role do you think the board should play in that?
Well, I think they should continue what the previous one started. I'm not sure if you're aware that this year the budget was done differently, where the schools that needed a bit more received a bit more funding, but that kind of took away from other schools that are used to receiving the money. And I know that there was a big discussion about that, and many parents were upset because they're so used to having these funds, and the schools that were underfunded were so happy to receive it. But also, I'm not sure if many are aware this is just like a one-time thing. It's just for this year. So I hope the new school board continues to look into those numbers. Supposedly they made a scale to see where the schools are based on what they need. So I hope they maybe do something else with that, or maybe like tweak it a little bit to see what could be done to have balance between all of the schools, which should be the main goal, that all the schools are equally funded, everyone could provide what they need for the students, because we have so many students that need different things, and then they get sent from school to school just to find that one service, which I also hear that neighborhood schools, are usually not seen as a first selection because they don't have those services, or because they're not seen as a top school. So a lot of the kids don't end up going to their own neighborhood school. So hopefully this new school board could look at that funding, fund the schools equally, and we could have all the services, and kids don't have to necessarily get out of their neighborhoods if they don't want to. I know that some students do get out of their neighborhoods just to get out of their neighborhoods to explore the rest of Chicago, but hopefully we do have the schools in a more equal playing field in like the near future.
Yeah, and to Abigail's point, actually like 75, the latest figures I think are 75% of high schoolers actually go to a school outside of their community, and the same is true for almost 45% of elementary school kids. So pretty sizable figures, and those have grown over time. They didn't used to represent an almost, majority in both groups, but they almost do now. Sarah, can you talk to us about what you think, what role the board has to address different kinds of inequities in funding, in resources, and then opportunities for students?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on like the specifics of how they work with the budget, but I would hope that it would be more equitably funded across the city. But I do see the problem where the lack of funding to local schools is why I think we're seeing lower enrollment in CPS as well as lower enrollment in neighborhood schools. personally, I don't go to my neighborhood school, but I go to Sen High School. It's in Edgewater, which is a neighborhood school to people who live in Edgewater. And I know a lot of people going forward will not be going to Sen because just recently, because of changes in budget, we had to cut our art coordinator. And the art program is a big draw for students from across the city to come to Sen. And because of that, it is a reason why students are no longer choosing to go to Sen and would rather go to schools like a charter school like Chai Arts.
Got it. Okay. And for those who aren't aware, this new funding formula that's been mentioned a couple times, it was implemented this school year, and it moved further away from funding schools based on the number of students that are in classrooms and focuses more on the needs. And as Abigail and Sarah kind of mentioned, like it was built to send more resources to schools that are more in need, but because the district was playing with the same amount of money, it essentially meant some schools were getting more while others weren't. That's just how the math worked out. So it's definitely something that I think people are continue to talk about. And it seems like the district is, monitoring how that's playing out at different school communities. Carrie, what do you think about, the role that the board has to address some of these inequities that we're talking about?
Oh. Whew. Well, with addressing some of them issues, well, like I have, not me, just me, myself have an issue. It's like with the district, I want them to like with the textbooks. Kids don't have the textbooks no more where they can be able to bring home, Hold on, wait, just give me 1 second, because I want to make sure I say that correctly.
No worries.
Just give me 1 second, because I know the textbooks is one of my issues that I want to address. Okay, here you go. More textbooks for each student to have their own. Better cafeteria food. I don't know if that's the right one that I'm on, and assign more homework. I don't know, it's like when they went to the budget, they cut out a lot of things. They cut out giving the children homework every day. They cut out the textbook. Well, the kids not learning from textbooks no more. They learning from, sometimes it's like the little paper books like you can get from Dollar Tree. So they not getting the same, I don't know, it's like the same education that I was getting when I was coming up. So I don't know what type of budget, why did they cut the budget, or why did they cut a lot of things, but it's a lot of things that they cut out that the kids definitely need. And like for instance, it could be like my son, he wanted to do the thing with video, digital. So I had to send him all the way to Curie because they didn't have it at no school in our neighborhood. So I had to literally get up and get on the bus with him to go all the way south from the west side just so he could be able to get that. And I don't feel like that's fair. I feel like every child should have the same opportunity and the same things that the other school has, the codings and the extracurriculars, all that. I think that should be in all CPS schools, not in just some. I think it should be for all.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying a greater investment in maybe in neighborhood schools and other schools that are in different communities.
Yes, because that'll stop the kids from our community. That will stop them from have to to try to search and go to another school that's not even in their neighborhood. That's why we losing a lot of our children in our community because we don't have them high schools with them types of activities in it. Like you can be a CNA, but you got to go out south in order to get into that program. Then it's the commute. Like now it's wintertime, so now it get dark at 4 o'clock. So when the kids come home from high school, it'll probably be 8 or 9 o'clock, but then they got to get right back up and be at their school about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Yeah, and this is something I feel like we hear all the time. It's like a perennial issue in Chicago, from parents and students. And the current Mayor Brandon Johnson, has made this a pillar of his education policies and hopes that he wants to boost funding for neighborhood schools. The district is in a tough position, though. It's looking at a big deficit next school year, and so I think. I certainly think that's something that we'll be watching to see how the new board addresses that going forward, or if it chooses to address that going forward. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna make sure that they think about, because these kids do matter. That's what I want them to realize. Like, you have some board members that's probably be just out there just for a check, but at the end of the day, start coming to some of these schools. Start interact with the kids. Ask the kids how they feel about certain things. Get their feedback, because who else can tell you more about the feedback or how they feel or what's going in the school but the kids? As the parents, we listen to our kids come to tell us. You know what I'm saying? But if you go to a school, now you hear from yourself, from mouth to mouth, communication, one-on-one, you hear from the students of how they feel. Just do a drop-off. Come to the school, spend probably like 10 minutes, 20 minutes in the school. You don't have to be there all day. Just spend 20 minutes to just get probably like 20 feedbacks from the school, from the kids in the school. Some of them ain't gonna like homework, but that's gonna get them. They need it. They need
it. Okay, and just to mention, these school board members actually aren't getting paid, but the broader point is like, yes, totally hear what you're saying, Carrie. Okay, so we've got 3 minutes left, and so if the three of you could, share some, quick, maybe 1-minute answers to this next question. So as we've discussed, this Board of Education will be made of 21 people. That's 14 more than currently. And, for reference, that's just under half the size of Chicago's City Council. So I'm curious what all three of you think about how that size will impact their ability to make decisions and to make policy. And Sarah, if we could start with you.
I think the difficulty rather would be in the fact that only 10 of the members are elected, and then the majority of the members will be appointed by Brandon Johnson. I think that we can see difficulties where perhaps like the elected members want something versus 11 members don't, and therefore, just because like the majority is appointed, there may not. I feel like there just may be some like inequality in that.
Abigail, what do you think?
So I agree with Sarah, but I want to look at the positive and say having more members, like I said, will allow them to come into the community more and go visit the schools and get more input from them, and hopefully bring that back so they could take into account everything they've seen and heard. So I'm going to look at the positive, but yes, there's definitely going to be difficulties, all of them agreeing.
A little dose of optimism. I do appreciate that. And Carrie, what do you think? What do you think this really giant board, elected board, how do you think they're going to be able to make policy decisions? How do you think that size is going to impact that?
Well, that's a big old number. That's a big number. And you have a lot of peoples that be on the yay and a lot of peoples that gonna be on the nay. So it can work and it cannot work. It could go both ways. But only thing we can do is just give them a try because we see as what the first board did, they walked out. So we just got to give this board a try and see what this board do. And if this board don't do what they supposed to do, then we just, parents, students, teachers, we just got to get together and get them boards that's not doing what they supposed to be doing and get them off the board. That's how I see it. I mean, it can work. It can work. It can work. But then, like I said, that's a large number. But if it don't, we just got to get together and get them off the board that ain't doing their job.
Well, that's actually a great way to wrap this panel. Go to the ballot box is what Carrie is saying. The whole point of the elected school board. Thank you. Thanks to the three of you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate all your thoughts. And I will turn it back to Imani.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your insights. We appreciate hearing from those most affected parents and students. And so yeah, we can keep it moving. We're almost at the end, guys. So now let's take a look at what's to come for Chicago's transition to an elected school board. So as we know, there are some remaining appointments for the mayor to make. So let's talk about the non-citizen advisory board. So this election excludes non-citizens from voting, leaving a significant portion of CPS families without direct representation in school board decisions. So to address this, the mayor must appoint members to a non-citizen advisory board tasked with advising on issues affecting non-citizen families in CPS. Challenges to participation, thinking about the current political climate that may discourage some non-citizens families from participating due to fear or mistrust. And so building trust and ensuring safety will be key to engaging non-citizen families in this advisory process. Next, there's the Black Student Success Committee. The mayor is also required to appoint a board member to chair a Black Student Success Committee, which will focus on addressing the achievement gap for Black students in CPS. So the committee will prioritize closing the achievement gap and addressing systemic inequities. Also, there are the remaining school board appointments. The mayor has until December 16th to appoint the remaining 10 school board members and the board president. This presents an opportunity to address gaps in representation and ensure the board reflects the diversity of CPS families and students. Like we mentioned earlier, currently there are only 4 CPS parents among the elected members. The mayor can use these appointments to increase parent representation and bring firsthand perspectives to the board. He can also balance racial and ethnic representation to better reflect the 89% of CPS students who are students of color. There are some key questions that come up when we think about the remaining appointments for the board members. So will the mayor choose to reappoint current board members or appoint losing candidates from the election? And the answer to that is really complex because any reappointed member or losing candidate would need to reside on the opposite side of town from the elected member to meet geographic balance requirements. If the mayor reappoints 6 current board members, there will still be 5 additional seats to fill with new appointments. And so before we get out of here tonight, I want you all to take a moment to sign this petition, calling on the mayor to appoint parents of color, current CPS parents of color, to the board to make up for any lack of racial representation or parent representation on the board. So I'm going to take a moment to pause here. We're going to drop this in the chat. And we're also gonna, if you want to scan this QR code from your phone, to please sign this petition, calling on the mayor to appoint parents of color, current CPS parents of color to the board. Am I frozen, everyone? So again, please sign this petition calling on our mayor to appoint current CPS parents of color to this new elected board.